On today's panel, we're talking about the rental market in Melbourne from the point of view of tenants and landlords. Joining me, Sophie Lyon from Philip Webb Real Estate, of course, the ubiquitous Robert Larocca from the Real Estate Institute of Victoria, and from the Tenants Union of Victoria, Toby Archer. Welcome, Toby.
Thanks.
All right, Sophie, we might start with you. What's the situation like at the moment for people who are looking to rent properties out there?
With the vacancy rates that are around right now, we basically are seeing that there are more properties. There's a lot more newer properties coming onto the market. So really, if you're out looking for a rental property right now, it's a really good time.
And what about from the point of view of rental prices? Is it a good time for people looking to rent, or rent's high at the moment?
Probably, I wouldn't say that they're high, but I wouldn't also say that they're dropping back. They're probably relatively level. I wouldn't say that there's been a great deal of dragging down of the prices. There has been a little bit of that, but what that seems to be is more of an overhang from properties that were leased at the height of the market about 2 years ago, and the tenants have continued on. And when those tenants have moved out, the owners have had to take sometimes a little bit of a step back. And
demand for properties? Have we got people lining up around the block to get in, or...?
No, we went through a phase of calling those rock concerts. We haven't seen a lot of those for a while. But there's definitely... there are numerous applications coming through on good quality properties, but those that aren't presenting as well, or those that the owners are perhaps being a little bit ambitious, in some cases they are suffering a little bit and they're sitting.
Toby, is that how you're seeing it? How's the union seeing the situation for tenants at the moment, or people looking for properties?
At an aggregate level, obviously there are more properties available, so that's a good thing. But our rental market's highly segmented, and if you're on a low income, you're still going to do it very tough, particularly given that if you're looking in a sort of a premium location, the odds are you'll be priced out by a higher income household.
And so what about the market for the lower end of the rental market? Are there properties out there in the suburbs they can look at?
Look, there are properties there. I think the National Housing Supply Council report from last year suggests that 75% of affordable private rental properties are actually occupied by higher income households. So even when they're there, if you're on a low income, if you're a minimum wage worker, if you're on benefits, you're really going to struggle to compete with those higher income households.
And being part of the tenant union, what are the main problems that people are coming to you with about trying to find a property, or once they've found a property, I suppose?
Look, the problems that people present with don't tend to change too much from time to time, and they're really around the classic issues around sort of bonds, repairs, rent increases, notices to vacate. Those things remain reasonably stable. Beyond that, though, the things that people are talking to us about are really the symptoms of affordability. So somebody rings about a rent increase, and you get into a conversation about how difficult their household budget has become, particularly in the last sort of half a decade.
Robert, where's it easiest to find rental properties at the moment?
Probably it's about the same right across Melbourne the last month or two. The really interesting trend, and it's probably two parts, is Sophie's right. Over the last year, it has become easier to find a vacant rental property, but it's still well below where we would like to see it. The vacancy rate's around 2.5%, should be 3% to have a bit more of a balanced market, and it has improved over the last 2 or 3 years. But the real problem is in the affordable segment, as Toby talks about, because the Office of Housing have got a classification of an affordable property, and those have halved across Melbourne in the last 10 years. So, you know, we've seen house prices increase in the last 5 or 6 years more rapidly than in the 5 years before that. The same problem exists in the rental market, particularly in the affordable segment. You really have to go to the, suburbs 30k out from Melbourne to find any level of affordable properties in the inner city, in anywhere within 20k's. It's sort of like 2-3%. And if you want to find something in regional Victoria, it's actually even harder right now, and Bendigo's the hardest place in Victoria.
To rent a property?
Yep.
So if you tell us, when people are looking for good tenants, what should they be looking for, whether or not they're renting it themselves or through a property manager?
Obviously, the experience of the tenant, their history. The tenancy history is one of the most important things to be checking through. Their employment, probably the personal references. They're going to give you personal references. They tend to be more people who are obviously going to say nice things about them. But employment reference, tenancy history. If they have always lived in their own premises before, obviously you can ring the selling agent and find out how the property was presented, what they were like to deal with, things like that. So just because they don't have a tenancy history doesn't mean that they won't be still great tenants.
Do you think sometimes that tenants get that, you know, these extreme cases we see on TV and sometimes we read about in the paper? Are these bad for the people's general view of anyone who rents?
Oh, without a doubt. We probably wouldn't be having the conversation really if those stories weren't around, and we'd be having a different conversation, I think, if that sort of sensationalist media focused on the other parts of the housing system, or focused on the fact that low-income households in particular find it very difficult to find somewhere to live. But unfortunately, I think there is a perception out there about what is a good tenant and what is a bad tenant, and that often affects letting choices, which in turn really impacts on particular households' ability to, I suppose, exist in our society and participate.
Do you give advice to people about how to present themselves well and what they need to do to be considered or to rank highly, I guess, with property managers?
Look, we do, and from time to time we do particularly work with clients who I think have particular issues finding rental properties. But at the end of the day, in our market, the overwhelming assessment is made on people's capacity to pay, and when people are on very low incomes, unfortunately the private rental market's not really going to deliver much for them, and that's really where I suppose the social housing system is really letting down our entire housing system.
Yeah, I mean, at the REIV over the last couple of years, we've watched as, you know, the vacancy rate's been lower than where it should be. You know, the amount of organisations, including government, that have come to us and sought the assistance of our members in helping disadvantaged people get ahead in the queue for a rental home. And the issues you've seen with rooming houses and substandard accommodation are all a factor of the fact that we haven't had enough rental homes, you know, and it is the affordable segment that is finding it very difficult at the moment.
Sophie, how can people help themselves when they're, I mean, what can they do to make themselves a better prospect, I guess, when
if they've had some difficulty, they really should be upfront about that in the beginning, because if it's something that in our reference checking comes up, there's always the reason as, well, why didn't that person have the conversation with us about that? And it does happen sometimes. You might be sharing a property with someone and it doesn't work out, and the other party was the reason that you were thrown out. They stopped paying their part of the rent, something like that. So I think it is important to enter into a dialogue with the agent as much as you possibly can. Obviously, if they've got 10 or 12 applications, it can be difficult for us time-wise to enter into a conversation with each of those people. But definitely I would say being as upfront and honest as you possibly can and giving us as much information as you can definitely makes it easier for us.
Are landlords realistic about rental returns at the moment on properties?
I think the media has been helping them become realistic in those areas. There are still a number of owners, obviously, who either won't recognise that or simply can't. They just can't go to a certain level of the rent for it to still be viable for them, because a lot of cases they are single investors and they have chosen to enter into this mortgage. They're leasing the property out and they legitimately need that rent in order to be able to service the loan.
Toby, if you could have a magic wand, what would be the one thing one area you would like to be working on? Is it that low-cost accommodation for people?
Look, absolutely. And I think part of the problem in housing policy in this country is that there is this idea that there is one solution, there's some silver bullet that's going to resolve the problems, particularly at the bottom end of the private rental market. You really do need more supply in the affordable end of the private rental market. You need more social housing, and you need to do some things with the tax mix to get the right incentives into that market.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
No problem.
Thanks.